the last couple of weeks where we've looked at 2 John, and we've looked at how we work out whether people are telling us the truth and what we can do about folks who we feel aren't telling us the truth. And we've been going through 2 John, and now we're going to go into 3 John. It's the third letter of John. Show me a person with zero political ambition whatsoever, and I'll show you a person I would vote for. Why do we think that? What is it about people who want to be in charge, who want to have power, who want to be seen, who want to be noticed, that makes many of us go, not really comfortable with that? That's not really right. And there's a little bit of 3 John where he just hints at this. We covered it briefly last week, and I said I would come back to it today. So 3 John is John's third letter. This one is writing to a guy called Gaius, and we know it's John writing because he's picked up the themes that we've looked at before about walking in truth. And he talks about the faithfulness of Gaius, and he particularly emphasizes that Gaius has been faithful in the welcome of strangers, and we talked more about that last week. But just to underline what we mean by faithfulness, we mean being reliable. And I wonder whether that is how others would describe us. Do people depend on us, that we are consistent, that we persevere, that we stay with a person in need or a friendship or something we said we would do? We stay with it. We don't just do it on the days we feel like doing it. We don't just do it when it's easy. We don't just do it when it's appreciated. We said we will do it, and we stay in it. So this guy Gaius is praised for his faithfulness, and that's contrasted, as we looked at last week, with another guy called, I don't know how you say this name, but I'm going to call him Diotrephes, which may be right or wrong, and you can tell me whether it's wrong or not. Anyway, last week we looked at the criticism that he isolated himself, and that he wasn't prepared to mix with people he disagreed with. And we asked ourselves the question, when do we isolate? When do we disassociate? When do we withdraw? And when do we stay in relationship and friendship with people we don't agree with? But I want to go back to this tiny little phrase, he loves to be first. And I want to just explore what that means, wanting to be first, because it affects, I realized after this morning, it affects more of us than I had first set out to think about. And it affects us in different ways. So we're going to look at the signs, we're going to look at the problems, and we're going to look at the remedies. Success for some people depends on becoming well known. For others, it depends on never being found out. And this highlights that this issue affects us all, but in 2 different ways. So there are some people, and we crave attention. We want to be thanked. We want to be appreciated. We want to be valued. We want people to know what we've done. We want people to know that we cleared up the dog mess. We hoovered. We washed up. We wrote that paper, we did that job, we fixed that thing, we sang that song, we performed. So there are some of us for whom that's a bit of a battle, and lots of us can easily see that in other people. But probably a bigger group of us are those who we compare ourselves to others, and though subconsciously we wish we were first, we know we're not. And so our comparison with others always leaves us feeling not good enough. So there's a two-edged sword. There are those of us who want to be seen, and there are those of us who don't want to be seen because we don't feel good enough. So wanting to be first, that we're going to kind of navigate this from those 2 directions. And the issue is, many of us will be able to say, yeah, I struggle with comparing myself to others. And we may also say, and I struggle with people who want to be at first, and they make me feel inadequate. It's much harder to be so self-aware to go, do you know what? I think there's a part of me that wants to be first, that wants to be noticed. And there's a part of me that maybe makes others feel and struggle because I'm putting them down. So we're going to explore all of that if we can. So do we spot it in others? If you've been involved in Christianity for any length of time, you will have seen, and I know there are people in the church who've been hurt and damaged by Christian leaders who loved the platform, the internet following, the TV channel. They love being important. And I know that there are folks among us who've been damaged by other streams of Christianity, other teachings, and it's all gone wrong. And we've realized it was built on something that wasn't healthy. So do we spot it in others? And do we spot it in ourselves? Or do we damage others and ourselves? And is our problem that we compete with others, or we compare ourselves with others? Or we're a competitor? We need to be more appreciated, more valued, better at something than other people? Or are we a comparer who goes, I'm just not good enough, I won't have a go because they're better than me? So that's where we're going to go. So what are the signs? How do we try and work it out? Because I always feel in preaching, it's really easy to say, oh, I know who that affects. I know who needed to hear that. And sometimes you nudge the person next to you and say, you should be listening to this. And it's so hard to see it in ourselves. So let's go on a little bit of a personal audit and say to God, will you show me what needs to be changed within me? Where am I vulnerable in this area? So is there for us a desire to be significant to others? Do we want a title? Do we like to be known for what we do? Our job? Be introduced as, this is Donald, the Reverend Donald. Do we want people to know who we are? Do we want to be the one that people identify as good? Do we need to be praised? If you've done something in the home, or you've done something at work, or you've done something in the church, or you did something down the street and nobody noticed, leadership didn't notice, the boss didn't notice, your family didn't notice, is that hard? Do you resent that? Do we feel that's not right? And do we look for opportunities to be praised? Jesus says this very strange thing. He says, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Now, this is hyperbole. This isn't literal. This is him using an idea. He's saying, I want you to so serve me that you don't care whether anybody else notices. I want you to be so focused on me, you don't even care whether your left hand notices what your right hand is doing. That's hard, isn't it? It's hard to do the things that aren't appreciated, that aren't valued, that aren't seen by other people. It is really hard. And do we find ourselves envying those who are praised, those who are given opportunities, those who do seem to be more popular than us? I want to read you a little quote, a couple of quotes from Richard Rohr. He's a really interesting guy. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says. I don't necessarily agree with everything of everybody I quote. But I do like this as a stimulating. He talks about the journey that human beings go on in this comparison thing. He says the sequence goes like this. We begin by comparing. We look at somebody else and we go, ooh, they can do this and I can't. And then he says, and therefore we copy them. We try to be the same as them. We're no longer trying to do what Jesus wants. We're trying to do what other people do because we want to be slightly better. And because we want to be slightly better than them, we compete with them. So we look at them and go, I want to be as good as that. In fact, I want to be slightly better than that. And then that creates a bit of a conflict, because sometimes we need to we either envy them doing better than us, or we gloat because they aren't doing better than us, and we rejoice and we tell everybody, and we post it and we show how other people aren't doing as well as we are. And so we conspire sometimes to make sure that they don't do as well. That person in the office, that friend, we try and set it up slightly so that they do look a bit of a fool, so they don't get the promotion, so they don't get the praise, so they don't get the client, so they don't get the bonus, so they don't get what we feel we want. And then we condemn the people, and we realize that if we can get everybody else not to like the people that we feel threaten us, and then he talks about, and we crucify. All because we're looking at somebody else, and maybe we wouldn't say we want to be first, but we're just looking at somebody else. And if we do not recognize some variation of this pattern within ourselves and put it at an end in the early stages, it is almost inevitable, he says. That is why spiritual teachers of any depth will always teach a simplicity of lifestyle and a freedom from the competitive power game, which is where it all begins. Is God saying to us, I want you to be free from the competitive power game. I don't want you to envy and resent other people getting praise and other people getting thanked. I don't want you to enjoy other people's failure. Because that's part of what goes on, is we delight to hear that the hero, and it's a very British thing, isn't it? We raise somebody up, they're the in thing, and then we're just really pleased when they mess up and they fail. And we compete. And Richard Rohr goes on, and he talks particularly about men. And this is, for those of us that are of the male species, I think there's something quite scary in this. He says part of our oppression as men is that we are taught to oppress others that have less status than we do. It creates a pecking order, a sense of superiority. Psychologically, we have to do this in order to have some feeling of superiority in the absence of any real accomplishment. So he's going to talk about the fact that there are men in our culture, and I think we see this in Britain, we saw this on the streets, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I see it at football matches, which I'll come back to in a moment, that where you have a man who doesn't feel that they're achieving anything, they do this. When we are prevented from making any actual difference in this world, we create the illusions of difference in order to have any self-esteem at all. For some reason, the ego creates itself by comparison and competition. I don't really have to be anything that great myself. I just have to know that I'm better, higher, stronger, smarter than the other guy. And so there's a generation, and maybe it applies to ladies, I don't know. I think it applies to us men. There's a generation of us, a culture here, where the only way to feel good about ourselves is to be better than somebody else. I go and watch Cambridge United, as lots of you know. It's a thankless task, but somebody has to do it. And one of the things that happened as we've gone up a couple of divisions takes me back to when I first started watching football in the 1980s. It was a group of guys, young men, ranging anywhere between 15 and my age, 32. They don't watch the match. So if you imagine we might be here behind the goal, and there'll be a group of guys over there from the opposing fans, similar to the guys I'm talking about. They'll be standing there. They won't watch the match either. Spend the whole time gesturing to each other about how they're going to have a fight outside later, and doubting the heritage of each of them, and using all kinds of gross, abusive language, because they just need to feel better than the people from the other team. Their whole identity is wrapped up that Cambridge United are better than Crawley. Clearly, really, we're not. We're lost. It's tragically pathetic. He says, this idea that I am good just because someone else is bad is toxic. And it's infecting our culture, where the only way to feel good about somebody is to abuse somebody else. The only way to feel good about ourselves is to abuse somebody else. So when we enjoy others' failure, there is a problem. But there's a third problem, which is that we may feel discouraged all the time. So it's kind of the opposite thing. It's not that we're competing, it's that we're comparing, and we retreat into ourselves and go, I'm just not good enough. I can't offer anything. Because I'm not as attractive, funny, good-looking, witty, brainy as this other person. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's a friend in our friendship group. Maybe it's somebody else in the office. We just back off because we don't want to expose our inadequacy. We adapt what we do and say to what will be most popular. We back off from what we think and we work out what does everybody else think, and we'll go with that. We adapt our behavior, our morals, our values to what other people are saying. If the group wants us to lie, we'll lie. If the group wants us to get drunk, we'll get drunk. If the group wants us to wear these clothes, say these things, do these things, we'll do these things, because we just want subconsciously to be okay. And it's a problem that lots of us experience. And we don't step out, we don't have a go at things because we're comparing and we don't feel we're as good as others. And there was an interesting ripple around the hall this morning when we talked about this, because I said, does anybody know, and I'm not going to ask you to put your hand up, but does anybody know anybody where this is the situation? Somebody says to you, oh, will so-and-so agree with this? In the family, if we say this, will so-and-so agree with this? In the workplace, will so-and-so agree with this? Maybe even in the church, will so-and-so agree with this? And you say, I don't know, because I can't work it out, but if it was their idea, they will. Do you know people who instinctively disagree with anything that somebody else says? But if it was their idea, they would be fine with it. Because I think many of us know other people. The key thing is, can we spot it in ourselves? Is there a defensiveness, a fear, an insecurity within us that instantly goes, no, that can't be right? Before we've even thought about it, there's an emotional reaction, because it's not come from us. It's a problem. And then we blame unhappiness on our lack of opportunity, on our lack of being noticed. If only other people had seen us and used us and developed us and given us a platform. We feel our sadness, our disillusionment, our emptiness is caused by other people. They are responsible, they are to blame because they haven't used us, developed us, thanked us, whatever it is. So what does all of this create? Well, it creates, for some of us, we won't do anything if nobody's going to thank us. And so the world is diminished because people won't do the unnoticed. Those who really want to be noticed and really overtly are competing will damage other people and use people to their own ends. And I know there'll be people here who felt that in family life, felt that in work life, felt that perhaps in a church life. And other people have used us because they just wanted to be better, and we were the person they pushed down in order to feel better. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. Can we spot it in ourselves? Can we ask God to help us? We'll talk about remedies in a moment. Another way of problem is that we don't encourage others, we don't delegate, we don't get other people to the skill level that we're at because we don't want them to be better than us. So we keep people de-skilled. But are we able to develop people who go further than us, do more than we can do, who achieve because we developed and encouraged them? Or are we those who just feel threatened if somebody else does what we do? And are we struggling to find lasting satisfaction? Wondering why we can't find peace. If only people would thank us. One of the problems with being thanked is it's a drug that's addictive. For some of us. Some of us hate it and we can't cope with it and we run away from it because we don't feel we're good enough. Others of us, we get a little bit of thanks and we go, oh, that felt good and I want a bit more. And it never satisfies. We never feel that we're good enough if our definition of being good enough is from somebody else. It's their opinion. So we constantly don't feel good enough. And we lose sight of Jesus as the one to serve. And that's where we're going to come back to. That's what we need to focus on. That when we are trying to be better than somebody else, we lose Jesus and we lose peace. And we lose integrity because people can spot it. Be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. That's countercultural. And it's hard. It's really hard. I struggle with it a lot. And when we lose integrity, we lose respect. Love fundamentally rejoices in the gifts and blessings of others. It seeks to promote and release them. The competitive spirit is the antithesis, the opposite of such love, and reveals a deep insecurity about our acceptance by God. So let's finish our audit and say, God, will you help us? What are the remedies if we know we're a competitor or a comparer? The first remedy is to spot it in others so that we don't get damaged. And I know lots of us watch stuff on the internet. We watch other preachers. You watch people that preach far better than me, and that's brilliant, and that's great, and it's really helpful. But just try to spot the ones that are doing it for themselves. A few cartoons for you just to help us. So, okay, so here's the deal. I am the rose and you are the thorns, and together we make a beautiful flower. Some of you will go, I don't get this. Some of you go, I've seen this on the internet. Some of you will even go, I've been to churches like this, where the pastor, and he's often called the pastor because the name matters, is bigger and it's damaging. It's all meant to be for the glory of God, but actually it's all about Pastor Bob. If you see that on the internet, if you ever see it here, walk away after you've given me or whoever's on the platform a slap. In love. But having been around for a long time, I have seen too many people who've been damaged by ego-driven, so-called Christian leaders. And it's really, really dangerous. And that is probably what John is saying about Diotrephes. Watch out for these guys. Because good-natured Christians are easy to manipulate. Greatness is not found in apparent possessions, power, or prestige, position or prestige. It is discovered in goodness, humility, service, and character. So our first remedy is to recognize it. We want to recognize it in ourselves. We need to recognize it in others that we don't get damaged. When we see it in ourselves, we need to avoid it in others. If we see it, go, that's not the leadership I'm going to follow. If we see it in ourselves, we need to be ruthless. When we are competing, we need to be ruthless with ourselves and say, I need to pull back from the patterns of competition. And so we move to a recognition and a confession. Most of us are either competing or comparing. Some of us will swing between each thing. We're sometimes competing, we're sometimes comparing. Sometimes we're pushing other people down, sometimes we're just feeling rubbish about ourselves. We come to God and we say, Lord, this is who I am. There is nothing better than honesty before God, of self-awareness, self-recognition, and saying, God, I'm sorry, I'm comparing myself to that person again, and it's hindering your work in me. Lord, I'm sorry. Lord, I'm competing with that person again, and I'm wanting to be better. I'm wanting to push them down. I'm wanting to hurt them. Lord, I'm sorry. Will you help me? We confess and we repent. We say, Lord, I'm sorry. Will you help me? Will you change me? It's only God that heals these insecurities that make us compete or compare. And we need to be alert to it. We need to spot it in ourselves. Don't spend all your time spotting in other people. There may be some specks in other people's eyes, but the problem is there may well be a log in our own. And we don't feed it. Don't feed it in ourselves. Avoid flattery. How did I do today? What did you think? Avoid seeking flattery. Do not feed it. Little cartoon for you. Don't encourage him, Sylvia. Flattery is so damaging. Value people, but don't lie, because it doesn't help. Encourage people in truth, what you can see. And then we serve. And this is really the biggest remedy, is we say, Lord, I'm going to do what you want. I'm going to do, and maybe my left hand won't know what I'm going to do. Maybe nobody will notice. Maybe nobody will thank me. Maybe nobody will appreciate it. Maybe I will get to my deathbed and it will be a secret. Except Jesus will know. And he will look and say, well done, good and faithful servant. And he will say, let me show you, as we said the other week, let me show you what you've done with your quiet, gentle service. True humility. I love the way Rick Warren puts things. True humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less. It's not beating ourselves up and comparing ourselves to someone saying, I'm rubbish. That's not true humility. True humility is saying, it doesn't matter about what I think about myself. What matters is, what do you need? And that takes us back to where Gaius is being praised. That what people need is reliable and persevering friendship, support, and care. And so that's what we focus on. There's a quote, I haven't used it, but there's a story about Mother Teresa, and she's asked, what success is, and she says she doesn't recognize the concept in the Bible. She says the only thing God asks of us is to be faithful. Just to keep going, just to hang on, just to do what God has asked you to do. What has he put in your hands? What gifts, what talents, what relationships, what opportunities, what people? This week, tomorrow, 10 o'clock, what are you going to be doing? Do it faithfully. Don't do it if you feel like it. What would Jesus ask of you this week to do? And do it. And if nobody spots you, and if you're not the best at it, doesn't matter. We don't have to be the best. In fact, we're not going to be the best. We just have to do what needs doing. So we serve Jesus, and we seek our worth from him. He's the one that puts his value on us, and it's the cross. What makes humility so desirable is the marvelous thing that it does. It creates a capacity for the closest possible intimacy with God. In other words, when we start stopping thinking about whether we're appreciated and we start thinking about whether we're doing what God asks of us, we find ourselves get closer to him. When we realize it's not about whether we're thanked and praised, it's whether God is blessed and glorified, we get closer to him. And so we work on the internal and not the external. Some of you will know of the writings of a guy called Gordon MacDonald. He is a Christian, an older Christian leader, as far as I know he's still alive, but he was a significant Christian leader in the 1980s, and he had a disastrous moral failure. He committed adultery, he lost everything, and through the help of his wife, through the help of his friends, he rebuilt his life. And he wrote a book called Restoring Your Christian World. He wrote a book called Ordering Your Christian World before he fell. He wrote a book afterwards called Restoring Your World. And it's an incredible book. I want to read you a little bit from it. He says, I asked God for a rebirth of spirit and mind, and I found a wonderful liberation from the expectation of the system which I had grown. Liberation from feeling that I always had to be right and to please everyone. Liberation from always having to be more successful than the last year. Liberation from feeling that some people wouldn't like it. And then he talks about being a servant. He wanted to be a servant with a certain liberation that said to be content, to be a pleasure to Christ. Can we do that? I just want to please Jesus. A pleasure to Christ, to love your wife, a good father to your children, a friend to those who want to share their life with you, and a servant to your generation. That shocked me. We're going to finish with communion together, I think. And we want to share that together. A little song I want to quote to you. I dreamed I saw my name in lights and spoke your word for all to hear. I dreamed my name was recognized by people far and near. But I have come to understand, like David long ago, that humble service in our house is still the greatest dream a heart can hold. So let me be a servant, a keeper of the door. My heart is only longing to see forevermore the glory of your presence, the dwelling of the Lord. Let me be a servant, a keeper of the door. We're going to spend some moments in listening to music, sharing in communion. We're going to bring to you the bread, which we'll just pass along the row. If you want to take one piece, don't touch anybody else's, because that's naughty. Just take your piece of bread. If you want to offer it to somebody else and say a prayer with them, if you know them, if you want to say something to them, that's great, but don't feel any obligation. The cup will follow down the aisle within 10, 15 seconds. These are symbols of Jesus' body and of his blood. He gave it to Judas on the night that Judas was to betray him. So I figure all of us are invited to take part. But if for any reason it feels not right for you, don't worry, just pass it along. But if you want to spend a few moments saying, Lord, I've been competing. Sorry. Or Lord, I've been comparing. Sorry. Then take those moments. Take this moment to reflect. We eat the bread to receive the forgiveness of Jesus. It's a symbolic act of saying, yes, Lord, I receive your mercy and your cleansing. We drink the cup to say, Lord, I'm offering myself again to you in service. So there are a couple of questions that are on the screen. Who should we be careful not to flatter? And where do we show traits of wanting to be first, competing or comparing? I want to pray for healing for us. Let's pray together. Lord, where we compete, forgive us. Lord, where we compare, forgive us. Where we have been damaged by others who have competed with us, heal us. Where we have been damaged because we have compared ourselves to others, heal us. Help us to see us as you see us, worth the death of Jesus, worth your body and your blood shed for us. We are infinitely valued, precious, called, gifted, equipped, sent out as your ambassadors, representatives. We matter to you. Help us to find that all of that is all we need.